So hello everyone. Take a very comfortable position and let's have a very short visualization, shall we? Let's link up as a group by sending a ray of radiant light of love to the ajna of our group members. Raise your consciousness as high as you possibly can, and then endeavor to hold them steady the mind in the group light, and realize that DK is also standing steady, pouring out upon us his love and strength, and endeavors to lift us up into a higher state of consciousness. Visualize ahead of us a disc or a sphere of indigo blue, a deep electric blue. And imagine DK standing in the center of that disc, waiting. And I see a band of golden light between us and the disc, gradually shortening, thus bringing us closer together, slowly and steadily, until we enter into the heart of the blue disc. And let us sound a blue Om. And now let's imagine that we are now in DK's studio, and let the words of DK then just sink into your brain as the drops of water falls on a very parched land. So today's lesson or study will be Rule 5, the radiatory technique in detail. But first of all, let's remind ourselves about the distinction between laws and rules. So laws are to be understood. The healers need to understand the process of stepping down the energy of the soul, whereas rules are to be applied practically, diligently and consistently, and with discipline. So the rules are those that the healer imposes upon himself. So they constitute the conditions which he is advised to follow if he seeks success. So therefore much depends upon his understanding of the rules and his ability to interpret them correctly. So when laws are not fully understood and the rules not applied correctly, then disaster awaits. So last 2 weeks ago, we ran through the rules. So we won't do that again today, but we will be looking at Rule 5, where the healer must seek to link his soul, his heart, his brain, and his hands. Thus, he can pour the vital healing upon the patient. This is magnetic work. It cures disease or increases the evil state according to the knowledge of the healer. Whereas the radiatory technique, the healer must seek to link his soul, his brain, his heart, and auric emanation. Thus can his presence feed the soul life of the patient. This is the work of radiation. The hands are needed not. The soul displays its power. The patient's soul responds through the response of his aura to the radiation of the healer's aura flooded with soul energy. So, simplified, Rule 5, apply, therefore, the magnetic or the radiatory technique. Now, we have already introduced you to the application of Rule 2, which is the superimposition of triangles. So you're quite familiar with that one already. Now, it sounds like a complicated procedure, but I can assure you, after having done it for years, this healing exercise of just placing, vitalizing, and directing becomes almost automatic. So let's look at the radiatory technique in detail. So what is the radiatory technique of healing? It's the simple method of gathering the force of love within and then radiating it out to the patient or to the group of patients in the form of a steady outflowing stream of radiant energy. DK tells us that the healers will therefore, in the very first cycle of work, attempt the radiatory technique. It is simpler and far more easily mastered, but also I think that DK wants us to practice the radiatory technique because he wants to develop the soul coming through our personalities. So to get us into that mind set, whereas the magnetic technique is really dependent upon the personality of the healer. So we've read the Rule 5 already, so we won't go through that again. And let's now have a look at the simplified version. So simply, it is a technique whereby the healer draws down soul energy down into the head area, where the gland, the pineal gland, which is the concretization or the precipitation of the crown chakra or the head chakra, which is the seat of the soul. So then the gland becomes the center of a magnetic field, which is set in motion by the power of visualization. Then he radiates it out onto the patient via his ajna into the form of a steady outflowing stream of radiant energy. It is directed to the center nearest to the location of the disease through the stimulation of the patient's aura controlled by the patient's soul. But because we are sending it to a group of patients, so it's difficult to know which chakra the soul of the patient needs. So we send it to the heart center, which then distributes the necessary energy to the rest, or to the chakra which needs it most. So the key points is the process is simple, it is safe and easily mastered. 2, the relationship between the healer and the patient is that of soul to soul. And success in radiatory healing is dependent to a great extent upon the ability of the patient's soul of the healer's soul to establish a firm relation with the soul of the patient. And 3, it's the soul of the patient who has the major responsibility because he works then in cooperation with the healer. So it is a soul-to-soul relation from the healer's soul to the patient's soul. Then The patient's soul is helped in what it has to do. The healer must link his soul, his brain, his heart, and his aura. The result is a constant circulation of force from the soul, then back again to the soul. The linking of the soul and brain is achieved when the healer superimposes the soul triangle over the chakric and the gland triangles, creating a magnetic field in the head center, in the head area. So the energy released then follows a direct line of contact with the brain. The importance of the brain. The linking process involves the soul, the brain, and the entire aura, or the magnetic field of the individual or the group activity. The brain acts solely as the focusing point of the love, and the healing force is projected into the stream of energy from the ajna center. Let's quickly see what the aura is. Just like the earth generates a radiatory magnetic field around it, so does man. The centers or their vibrations, the chakras or the vibration of the chakras, are in reality what constitutes the aura of a human being. Or it's the subtle field of radiation of the vibration of the chakras. That's all it is. So, few key points here, advice from DK. Keep the focus in the head, and your center of attention will be focused there too. Why should that be so? It's because the healer should not overstimulate his own chakras, hence the need to keep the focus in the head. And that's a very, very important point, because energy is an impersonal force and a purely impersonal agency. So you do not want the rest of your chakras to be overstimulated, particularly the lower ones, solar plexus, base, and sacral. So you keep the focus in the head constantly. We also do not focus on the physical disease. And why is that so? Because we don't want to energize the disease, because energy follows thought. So particularly with the beginners, you know, as a beginner, we tend to be very keen to apply the energy. So that's where the word of warning is. Do not focus on the disease. And secondly, because the healer works only with the etheric body, not with the physical body at all. And being occultist, we know that the body is not a principle, okay? It's got basically no initiating life of its own. It only receives the impact of the energy from the inner bodies, which is mental, astral, and the etheric. So the healer works only with the etheric body, leaving therefore the energies that he transmits through his etheric body to make their impact upon the automaton of the physical body according to the intent. Linking soul, brain, and heart. The heart chakra, being one of the anchoring points of the soul in the etheric body, is automatically linked. There are 3 anchoring points of the soul in the etheric body: the head chakra, the heart, and the throat. And from these points, from the head, then the energy goes down to the base. From the heart, it goes to the solar plexus, and from the throat to the sacral. These are the 3 anchoring points. So when we send the energy to the heart center, our heart center, when we, not download, but when we step down the energy from the ajna, the heart is automatically involved because we are using the energy of love. Now, the linking of soul, brain, heart, and its effect on the aura. When we link our soul, our brain, and our heart, that causes an energizing of the personality of the healer, and therefore of his aura. Because as we said earlier on, the aura is just the vibration of the chakras. His aura would be seen by a clairvoyant as greatly extended, in rapid motion, and energized by light from his own soul, and with all its radiation turned in the direction of the patient, in our case, to the group of our patients. The radiatory healing is brought about by the mingling of the 2 auras. In other words, the aura of the group of healers and the aura of the group of patients, both of them being responsive to soul contact. Speaking symbolically, it is almost as if a great vortex of energy were set up by the contact of the 2 auras and by their high vibration. The healing force of the healer, or the healing group, stimulates all the 3 personality vehicles of the patient. And then the soul, the patient's soul, is then aided or helped in the work that it has to do. So that's why we are saying that the responsibility lies with the soul of the patient, because the soul of the patient knows its own agenda. We don't have spiritual perception yet to be able to know exactly what the soul has got in mind. That's why we leave the responsibility to the soul of the patient, because he himself and only himself will know his own destiny. The resultant effects of the mingling of the auras is that the soul aspect of both, in our case, healers and patients, under the control of the soul, is then directed towards some area of the patient's physical body. And that produces a tremendous effect upon the disease area, and the center or the chakra becomes also exceedingly energized. It's the agent which is the it is the aura which is the agent of radiation, not the hands. As Rule 5 says, the hands are needed not, the soul displays its power. Thus his presence feed the soul life of the patient, and the patient's soul responds through the response of his aura to the radiation of the healer's aura, flooded with soul energy. But however, DK recommends the use of the hands for beginners, so it's not a contradiction. The healer radiates it out onto the patient in the form of a steady outflowing stream of radiant energy, then sends it out from the ajna and directs it through the medium of his hands to the patient. Remembering that the radiatory technique, as we are using, as Moria Federation are using, from DK's book, Esoteric Healing, from pages 100 or so, is arranged for beginners. Okay? So that's why DK recommends the use of the hands and the directing of the healing energy to the heart center of the patients. So it's not contradictions, but are simply of the technique. So from the Ajna center, send streams of living light and love to the heart center of the patient and the group. But work from the Ajna center, because the Ajna center is the chakra of distribution. Okay. So working from the Ajna, the heart center of everybody involved will be closely related. Heart and Ajna. Oops. So why the heart center? Because the heart center registers the energy of love. The life principle, which is the flow of divine energy through all forms, is temporarily seated in the heart. The life principle controls the mechanism through the medium via the bloodstream, for the blood is the life and uses the heart as its central organ. The life or the spirit aspect carries regenerating power and coordinating energy to all the physical organism and keeps the body whole. And the worker works with the life aspect. The heart center is the organ for the distribution of the hierarchical energy poured via the soul into the heart center of all aspirants, disciples, and initiates. The love of God is shed abroad in the human heart, and its transforming magnetic and radiatory power is essential for the reconstruction of the world and for the establishment of the new world order. So have ever in mind that love is an energy, and it is a substance as real as dense matter. And that substance can be used to drive out diseased tissue and provide a healthy substitute in place of the diseased material which has been eliminated. So the heart center is the distributor of hierarchical love. A loving heart is one of the most potent of all energies employed, we are told. There should be complete silence during the healing. And the process is that of energy or soul potency upon force, force meaning on the chakras. So why the silence? It's because the task of the healer is to preserve an attitude of intense concentration upon the triangle, soul, brain, and heart within his aura. So the work is silent. There is no loss of power at any time, as there is always a loss of power through the spoken word or affirmation. Speech and discussion tend to deflect and dissipate force. In my very, very early years, I remember I didn't know DK at the time. I belonged to a healing group. Even at the time, I was shocked. While they were giving healing, the healers were talking amongst themselves, basically gossiping, and I was absolutely shocked. And of course, at the time, I didn't even understand why. It shouldn't be so. But instinctively, I knew that that was wrong. Now I know. Is discussion and speech deflects and dissipates the force. Here we're trying to build a very, very delicate thought form. And that delicate thought form is made of mental matter. And this is very delicate and it gets dissipated very quickly. So having made his contact then, the healer simply waits and has nothing more to do but to hold his soul alignment steady and permits nothing to disturb his personality vehicles. Because then the soul energy will energize his personality vehicles and the chakras. The result is a constant circulation of force from the soul back again to the soul. This causes necessarily an augmenting and energizing of the threefold personality of the healer, and therefore of his aura. And by this means, the healing force of the healer stimulates all the three personality vehicles of the patient, and the patient's soul is aided in the work it has to do. The mingling of the two auras has an energizing effect that produces a tremendous effect upon the disease area, and the chakra in the same locality becomes also very energized. Let's have a look at the spiritual effects. The radiation of the healer's soul stimulates the patient's soul to bring about his own healing. The mental effects, the radiation of the healer's mind illumines the patient's mind and polarizes his will. The astral effects, the radiation of the healer's astral body imposes a very calming rhythm on the patient's agitated and stressed astral body, enabling the patient to take right action. But here also, because the patient's solar plexus or astral body is calmed down, then it allows the soul energy to penetrate. Otherwise, this acts as a barrier. As long as the patient is going to be stressed and agitated, of course, because they are sick. So there is always stress when one is sick. So that needs to be done. And that's a very important aspect of the healing. Because without the calming effect of the patient, then the soul energy can't penetrate. And the etheric effects is that the radiation of the healer's etheric body working on the pranic fluids through the splenic center enables it to distribute them to the chakra closest to the disease area, thus restoring the body to health. And in our case, with the heart center. from the heart, then that energy is distributed to the needed chakra. Now, DK tells us that some of us will be predisposed to mental healing, while others will function more easily along the astral or psychic healing, and still others will bring about physical healing. It all depends on our ray makeup, on our level of evolution ourselves. But that's a good thing. When we work as a group, it means that the group should be able to work with the whole person or with groups as a whole. Because then these three aspects, the mind, the astral body, and the physical body, are all affected in some form or another by some members of the group. So hence the importance of working as a group. Because together we can achieve far, far more than we can on our own. Call for service. It is essential, DK tells us, that servers everywhere, the intelligent men and women of goodwill, get a grasp, fresh and clear, of the work to be done, and that they become relaying channels and not delaying points of selfish interest in the divine flow. This takes vision and courage. It takes courage to adjust our lives daily and in all relations to the need of the hour and to the service of mankind. And particularly now, friends, we're only 4 more years to the conclave of hierarchy, when the Christ will announce his reappearance. When, where, and how. And our task, our generation, up to 2025, is called the stage of the forerunner. We're a bit like the John the Baptist. We are here to prepare men's minds and hearts for that eventual and imminent reappearance. So it's important for us to work as a group and to prepare men's minds and men's hearts, so that, a bit like the farmer in the field, ploughing the field, making the soil more fertile, so that when Christ comes, that seed will be able to grow, the seed of love that the Christ and all his teachings that he'll bring with him will find a fertile soil in the hearts and minds of people. And the analogy that I love to use is that we are like a lighthouse, transmitting light, so that we need to be channels for the love and light of the soul in hierarchy. Beacons of light, DK likes to call it. So what must we do? The disciple has to take himself as he is at any time, with any given equipment and any given circumstances. He will then proceed to subordinate himself, his affairs, and his time to the need of the hour, particularly during the phase of group, national, and world crisis. And we are in a world crisis, because the dark forces know that their hour is nearing the end. The hour has arrived. So they are trying just about everything and throwing whatever they've got, confusion, misinformation, chaos, fear, you name it, it's throwing at us, at humanity, because they feel the presence of the Christ coming down. So when the disciple does this within his own consciousness and is therefore linking along lines of true values, he will discover that his own private affairs are taken care of, his capacities increased, and his limitations forgotten. I'll reread that last paragraph. When the disciple does this, in other words, subordinates himself, his affairs and his time to the need of the hour, when he does this within his own consciousness, in other words, he's made that decision. Now, tomorrow morning, or at least Australian time, is the Libra full moon. Libra is the time of decision. And that's when we need to make our decision. Are we going to go our merry way and let life come in the way of our desire, our decision to be of help to humanity? Or are we going to make that decision to subordinate ourselves, to consecrate our energies, to distribute hierarchical love? It's a time of decision at the Libra full moon. Or if you have already done so, it is a time of decision of how do we improve our service so that we can be more efficient and of greater service. So when he does this within his own consciousness and is therefore thinking along the lines of true values, meaning values of the soul, he will discover that his own private affairs are taken care of. His capacities are increased and his limitations are forgotten. So all we have to do, friends, is throw ourselves in the deep end, because now is the time at the Libra full moon to throw ourselves in the deep end, to prepare men's minds and hearts for Christ's reappearance.